Ring-a-ling-a-ling, y'all. It's Sabbath School time. I'm here to help teachers and front row students think creatively and critically so you can get the most out of your class. Now, this quarter we're studying Daniel, as you know. In fact, we're almost done. And today we're covering the lesson for March 14th, 2020, From Battle to Victory. Let's go! We're in Daniel 10 this week, dealing with the final vision of the book of Daniel. There's really only two visions in Daniel. Chapters 7 through 9 are part of the same vision as our chapters 10 to 12. And of these two visions, this is definitely the weirder one. So let's move on to Sunday. Once again, we find Daniel troubled. Cyrus had allowed the first of the exiles to go back to Israel the year before, but Daniel is still in Babylon. Maybe he's too old to return. Who knows what's going on? Now, Jacques Ducan believes that Daniel is mourning for 3 whole weeks because he is beginning to hear how the Samaritans are making life difficult for the returning exiles. This parallels chapter 9. Chapter 9 begins with Daniel feeling anxious because the 70 years of exile were almost up, and he wanted to make sure his people were right with God. Chapter 10 begins with Daniel feeling anxious about something, probably the obstacles these exiles were facing. And Daniel is not having a good time in the last half of this book, guys. I mean, chapter 7, 8, 9, 10, he's always distressed about something. He's in his 80s or 90s, and he probably just thought, we just have to get through this 70 years of exile thing, and then everything will be okay, but it's turning out to not always be okay. And first, because in the last few chapters, Daniel is seeing that some little horn is going to persecute his people. And second, because things weren't going well for the returning exiles. Third, things weren't going well for Daniel himself. Daniel doesn't dwell upon his own difficulties like ever, but his heart is definitely with Israel. It's in the land of Israel. He must have wished he could have returned home. It reminds me of that scene in Lord of the Rings where Frodo is about to get on the boat to sail into the west, and his friend Sam protests, "Hey, we saved our home. Why would you leave?" And Frodo replies, "We have set out to save the Shire, Sam, and it has been saved, but not for me." And maybe Daniel kind of feels the same way, like we've gotten through this exile, but I'm not one of the people who get to enjoy it. Daniel's fervent prayers and faithfulness to God was a victory, but the victory wasn't for him to enjoy. His last act was praying and fasting for 3 solid weeks for a group of people he didn't know in a land he'd never get to see. So what were these Samaritans back in Israel doing? These are the bad Samaritans, all right? Not the good Samaritans. These are the bad Samaritans. Ezra tells us that they were bribing Persian officials and trolling the Jews, and this was apparently enough to make Cyrus pause on whether he should continue supporting the rebuilding of this temple. And specifically, it seems that this is what Daniel must be praying about. On to Monday. At the end of 3 weeks, Daniel is standing by the river when he sees this divine man dressed in linen and with skin like topaz and a face like lightning. I don't know what that looks like, but anyways, this vision is like what we see in Revelation 1, but there's also a connection to Saul's vision on the road to Damascus, in that Daniel sees this being, but the people who are with him do not. They didn't see the being, but they were terrified by his presence nonetheless. They fled and hid like Adam and Eve. There's even a parallel to Joshua 5 here, because the phrase, "I looked up and there before me was a man," is exactly the same in both books. And what's more, Ducan reminds us that Daniel sees this man right after Passover, just like in Joshua. So we have all sorts of rich connections going on between this passage and other passages in the Bible, in Genesis and Joshua and Exodus and Acts and Revelation. It's pretty cool. It's clear this being is divine, but the lesson points out how this being has royal, priestly, and military attributes. Daniel doesn't make this clear for obvious reasons, but I'd say this being could be Michael the Archangel. Who knows, okay? Who Ava to see as Jesus. I say this is obvious because Daniel, of course, doesn't know what Michael looks like. The angel, who we'll call Gabriel, because Gabriel explained the last vision to Daniel, he tells Daniel that he has been fighting against the prince of Persia, no, not Jake Gyllenhaal, until Michael, the great prince, arrived to help. And it stands to reason that Michael is now standing before Daniel with Gabriel, or maybe not. Who knows? We'll talk more about this Michael person when we get to the Thursday's lesson. For now, on to Tuesday. It's really interesting that the lesson focuses on the fact that an angel touches Daniel 3 times. I mean, sometimes with these lessons, we get like these great big sweeps of history. And here we have a lesson covering 3 taps on the shoulder. And it's intriguing to me how physical contact sustains Daniel, how that works. The New English translation says, I was without energy. It translates Daniel, his not feeling very well, right? I was without energy. And so the touch that Daniel receives restores some energy. Somehow in that physical contact, energy is flowing back into him. Strength is returning. In much the same way that the people Jesus touched were made whole. And somehow power is transferred through touch. I don't know how that works. But it's a very human thing, right? The angel doesn't stand back and just wave his wand and restore Daniel. He moves into Daniel's space. He lifts Daniel up. It's personal. It's intimate. The NET translates this encouragement the angel gives Daniel. Daniel, you are of great value. This is what the angel tells Daniel several times. So it's touch and it's words of affirmation. He's got Daniel's love languages covered, all right? Now, Daniel is told that from the moment he started praying, his words were heard, and this is why the angel has showed up. Shown up, whatever. Okay, so why did you take so long? We're going to get to that on Wednesday. And speaking of that, it's Wednesday. So what we have here is this awesome behind-the-scenes look at how prayers are answered. There's really nothing like it in all the Bible. Yes, Gabriel was dispatched the moment Daniel started praying, but he got tied up with the Prince of Persia. Again, not Jake Gyllenhaal. Gabriel seems to expect Daniel to know what he meant by this, what he means by this. So we can only imagine that Daniel was praying that the opposition to building the temple would be overcome. The Samaritans were that opposition. They seemed to have King Cyrus on their side for the moment. So Daniel wanted God to change Cyrus's mind to be in favor of the temple. So in answer to Daniel's prayer, Gabriel just kind of flies down, was doing some kind of spiritual Jedi battle to influence Cyrus. And there's no mention of any demonic forces opposing Gabriel. The obstacle here is Cyrus. God doesn't just snap his fingers and change the king's mind. It's clearly some kind of persuasion game. Now, for 3 weeks, Gabriel did everything he could, was not succeeding, and that's when Michael, the great prince, showed up to help. And Michael's arrival enabled Gabriel to come brief Daniel on what was going on and then return back to the battle with Cyrus. So let's make this snappy, Daniel. To Daniel, it looked like his prayer was useless. I mean, nothing seemed to happen for 3 weeks. But man, a lot was actually happening for 3 weeks. Right? Daniel's prayer brought Gabriel and eventually Michael into battle, which is pretty cool. Okay, on to Thursday, the last day. So who is this Michael guy? Well, Adventists believe Michael is Jesus. And now, when you say that, you're going to scandalize just about every other Christian out there. So if you're teaching this lesson, be aware of that, okay? It's going to seem blasphemous because to say that Jesus is an angel, you're taking him down, he's not divine anymore, right? You're making him into an angel. That's scary to a lot of folks. That's offensive to a lot of folks. So be aware of this when you teach this lesson, and be prepared to perhaps answer this question if you have somebody who's visiting with you who's never heard this before or who may be upset by this, okay? We can all agree that to call an angel God is blasphemy. Okay, Michael is called an archangel in Revelation 12. He's explicitly called an angel. An angel cannot be God, right? Well, Michael is a really interesting figure, and I'll put an article down below if you want to study more. People shouldn't dismiss out of hand the idea of Michael being Jesus, though. I mean, the President of the United States can be the chief executive of the government and also the commander-in-chief at the same time. And archangel can be translated as simply ruler of angels. I think the idea here is that this is the commander-in-chief of the heavenly army. And what's really amazing here is this vision of how heaven works. There's an army, and prayer and faith can mobilize this army in ways we maybe have never dreamed of as human beings. I mean, sometimes it feels like nothing's happening, when in reality our faith is like sending an army in motion on our behalf or on the behalf of other people that we're praying for. In Daniel's case, he never lived to see the resolution of this conflict. The angel army fought Cyrus and his son and the next one and so on, but the temple was eventually rebuilt. His prayer was eventually answered, even if Daniel wasn't around to see it. And that's where we're going to stop this week. Hope you have a great discussion in your class. Study up, and we'll see you next time. It's clear this being is divine. The lesson points out how this being has... I am now recording. Frodo replies, "We set out to save the Shire, Sam, and it has been saved. The Shire's been shaved."